Brian Childress, thank you so much for being with us today in our call. We're going to talk about, I think, a very interesting topic, and I will let you intro yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and everything. But to just give an intro to everyone listening on what we are going to be talking about, it's where did all the architects go? What happened to this profession, and why is it more important than ever, and how you can make room for it in your organization? So I want to start with asking you, Brian, about your story and how you became the architect you are today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mateo. It's really good to be here. I would say that my path to my current role in the work that I do has not been a straight line by any means. Um, Software is actually my second career. My first career path was so far removed from software as I know it today that it's almost comical. Um, but thankfully, I've found my way into software and have had a really great career and opportunities to join some really fun organizations and projects, work with some really great folks from all over the world, and being able to solve interesting business problems with technology.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about some of the organizations that you've been and the role you played in some of those organizations.
Yeah, so I started out my career as a software developer. My first start was in geographic information systems. So I worked with organizations that were collecting a lot of location-based data, doing analysis on that data, and then ultimately displaying that data in various forms, whether it was an interactive portal, web application, to large printed maps. From there, I moved into healthcare and had an opportunity to work as a government contractor across a number of different government organizations in helping to use software so that we can provide better medical services to our population. After leaving kind of the healthcare world, I had an opportunity to then move into finance. I worked with organizations that did mortgages and banking. Also worked with organizations doing alternative investments and building software that allowed us to analyze current and future trends in financial data, surface that data so that we can then make better business decisions. I've also worked in consumer SaaS products, building out SaaS applications. I'm working on a project now that's focused on cybersecurity and behavioral change, as we can better support organizations from a cybersecurity and application security perspective. And that's been a really fun project to work on. So really kind of across the board, but I would say predominantly most of my career, I've had an opportunity to work with some interesting problem spaces, and typically with very highly sensitive information and data, specifically in the healthcare and finance space.
Thank you, Brian. Very, very interesting. As we dive deeper into what the role of an architect is, what can you tell us about that? What are the main responsibilities of an architect?
I think the role of an architect is an interesting one because it can vary across organizations and across projects. Typically, the architect is someone that has a deep level of technical knowledge. They also have a broad sweep of technical knowledge as well. So they understand kind of a very broad ecosystem and then a deep set within that ecosystem. So you're kind of typical T-shaped developer. They also will have a really good understanding of how technology plays a role in the business, and being able to tie business goals and initiatives to the technology, and how can we better solve the desires of the business with technology. architects tend to have a longer kind of purview or view of things. They're looking at, at least 12, 24 months out to make sure that the organization is in a place that is able to support some of those bigger business initiatives moving forward. But really, the architect role, I think it's very unique within organizations. Me personally, I kind of have played, not only a highly technical person and being able to help design and troubleshoot certain scenarios, but I also play, almost a confidant or a therapist in many ways in working with different individuals, engineers, and teams across the organization, because I bring a bit of a different purview and perspective. And I think that has allowed me to really grow in my roles that I've held as an architect.
Very good. And that drives us actually into our next question. Why are architects important? Is it because of that, the way that you tie technology to business, the way that you were talking about that perspective, that long-term vision that you always have? Why do you think architects are so important for organizations?
I think that's exactly right, Mateo. That an architect is good at understanding how technology plays a key role in the business. And I think that's something that as engineers we might lose sight of, is that the business is there to support its customers and provide great value. And technology is just there to support that effort. If there's not a business, then unfortunately we don't have, a role as an engineer. And so it's important for us to maintain focus on what is the reason that we're here, what is it that we're trying to solve, and let's make sure that we solve it in the most effective and efficient way, so that we can continue to grow and scale as an organization.
Very good. Brian, is a CTO the same thing as an architect, or an architect the same thing as a CTO?
I'll have to give the obligatory it depends answer to that one. I think there can be some overlap in the CTO role and the architect role. A good architect could potentially be a good CTO, but I don't think necessarily that a good CTO has to have a strong background in software architecture. I don't even, depending on the organization, think that a strong CTO even needs to have a strong background in engineering. I think understanding all of the pieces that are required to support a strong technology organization is important, but I don't think that they're necessarily one and the same. Great architects may not have a desire to take on the role of a CTO and everything that comes along with that particular role. So again, I think it does depend on the person and the organization.
Got it. Do you think architects are out of fashion? And if the answer is, whatever it is, actually, why?
It is interesting. I do think that the industry as a whole has shifted, and the quote unquote role of an architect, I think, has changed. The ivory tower architect that many of us have, potentially worked with in the past, I don't think that exists as much in the same way as it has in the past. I think in order for an organization to successfully use the role of an architect, or for an architect in an organization to be successful, I think that they have to be much closer to the action than architects have been in large organizations in the past. And again, that's kind of painting with a very broad brush, but I do think it's important for architects to kind of understand what it is that their teams are working on, have a bit deeper understanding of the technology and how that plays a role into day-to-day development. And so I think the role of an architect has shifted, but it still has some importance in the organization. There may not be one individual or a group of architects within an organization any longer. I think they're going to be much more spread out,
Mhm.
just given kind of the state of what organizations are kind of shifting to, with more independent teams with more autonomy. Uh, the responsibilities of the architect have to evolve as well.
Okay. So my next question is going to be, what makes a good architect? And you touched a little bit on it, right? It's no longer the ivory tower architect. It's someone that gets more involved into the day-to-day and into actually the weeds, right? It's that part of it. What makes up a good architect besides that?
I think a good architect, yes, has strong technical background. They're probably not writing production code every day,
Mm.
um, but they are able to jump in and understand a large um, picture of the technology landscape. I think another good quality is that an architect is able to work with and gain trust among individuals and teams, and not in any type of manipulative way, but it's important for an architect and others within the organization to have a good, strong working relationship, because they have an opportunity to provide some very unique perspective and mentorship in the organization. um, I think it's also important that a good architect, they've they've been around a little while. They've seen some things. They are able to help the organization kind of see around those blind corners to understand what is the potential impact of some of the decisions that we're making today, and how is that possibly going to play out in the future. So I don't think that uh, just having a few years of experience really gives us enough of a view into that future as we might like. So I think a good architect is, kind of a seasoned technologist in many ways.
Very good. Um, Brian, you are an architect at Calendly and you provide fractional architect and CTO services. You have a lot on your plate, right? How do you manage your time? How do you manage through all of that?
You're absolutely right. I do have a lot on my plate. And the way that I manage that is just through hyper prioritization. Um, I'm fortunate in both ways that I have flexibility in the time that I can put into my work. Family is also very important to me, so I want to make sure that I'm available and present for them. And so, it's very focused on prioritization. I try and hold a fairly strict routine. I'm not always successful, but a strong morning routine, and then a day, my typical workday routine, and then I have tasks that I will kind of work on later in the evening. So it's very much a combination of there's a lot of things going on. Now, in that, the way that I stay organized, I live by regular kind of notebooks. I prefer analog for collecting a lot of notes. I also have a few different tools that I use to, collect notes and develop my own personal playbooks, so that I can keep resources available and handy, so that I don't have to remember everything. I also live by my calendar. Typically, if it's not scheduled on my calendar, then it's not high enough of a priority, and there's definite potential that it will get missed or forgotten. Um, yeah, it's a fun kind of balancing act right now to be able to do both.
How many notebooks do you burn through? Like, how fast do you burn through a notebook?
So I love these, kind of the 50 cent composition notebooks. That's my
Mhm.
go-to. I'll burn through one of those probably every 2 months.
Okay.
I organize myself with my daily schedule. So the important meetings that I need to be a part of, any to-do tasks, and then from there, any notes that I'm taking throughout the day. So, typically anywhere from 1 page to many pages are taken up in that notebook every day. And it is kind of nice because I have collected those notebooks over several years. So I do have a lot of great notes and resources that I can refer back to if I ever needed to. So those are the things that tend to carry with me across projects and across roles.
Very nice. I'm sorry about asking too many questions about the notebook. It's just I love it and I do something similar. Do you go back to your notes? Let me tell you what I do and let's see if you do something similar. I
Okay.
do the weekly vision of pending items, and like I like putting everything in one page so I can visualize the thing in one page. And then on a daily basis, I do something similar for that day, right? But less notes, very, very simple, like the 3 or 5 things I have to achieve that day to make it a successful day, right? But many times what I do is I go back to like the last month and I read all of my notes to keep myself on track and then to do the next weekly kind of pending tasks view. Do you go back as well to your notebooks, or do you just keep on the present and future?
No, I absolutely do. I think it's great to not only remind myself of the progress that has been made, the tasks that have been completed, or the opportunities that I've been able to be involved in. But I think it's also important to make sure that nothing is getting missed, right? If I didn't
Right.
check off a to-do list item, I can go back and revisit that. Maybe it's no longer important, or now it's even more important for me to take that into consideration. So that's really why I like the tactile nature of a physical notebook and being able to
Mm.
flip back and forth across those pages. Now, I certainly can't search it in the same way that I could if it was digital.
Right.
But I do prefer that format. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. What are the biggest challenges that you face as an architect?
I think so. My particular role, I serve somewhere between, let's say, 5 and 7 different teams. They're kind of within a couple different groups, but they are there's a lot of teams, and on each team is a number of different engineers and product folks and folks involved on the team. And what's even more challenging with that is I'm working in a fully distributed team. So asynchronous communication is incredibly important. And for me, across all of those different teams, trying to stay up to date with all of the conversations that are happening. It's not just being involved in one team. I'm trying to be, stay up to date across many, many teams. And so I found that to be kind of the biggest challenge, is just to stay aware and keep others aware of important movement and things, decisions that are being made, and ideas that are being surfaced. I don't want to lose sight of a lot of those things. And again, kind of going back to the notebooks, I think that's where it's important for me to go back and review my notes, just so that some of those things don't fall through the cracks. But I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I have, is just kind of trying to be in all the meetings and be in all the places when it's just not possible.
Do you reject many meetings, invitations? I mean, you have to be very mindful of your time managing so many teams, right? Do you find yourself saying no to meetings? How do you manage that?
I absolutely do. And you want to be involved, or at least I want to be involved in as much as possible, right? That kind of fear of missing out. But I have to be very diligent in my calendar. Again, I kind of live by my calendar. Now, because I support a number of different teams and initiatives, I want to kind of keep touch with as many of those as possible. So I will kind of stagger the meetings that I attend based on the initiative or the team, and making sure that I'm uh, trying to give as much attention as I can. I also very much leverage recorded meetings. So if it's something that is going to be recorded, or I can ask to be recorded, I will. And that has been kind of a game changer, because I can go back and review those recorded meetings, at a much faster speed, and get through the content. And I can do that when it makes the most sense in my schedule.
Very nice. You manage a lot of teams, but you also manage a lot of different technologies in a lot of different projects, right? And you were just mentioning that at the beginning of our conversation. How do you keep up with all the new technologies out there?
Yeah, it's a fun challenge, but I think one that I really enjoy, and part of the reason that I've been drawn to technology so much is that there is always something out there new to learn and kind of play around with. For me, I'm very much an auditory learner and very tactile, so I like to um, listen to a lot of different podcasts. I'm the person that's going to ramp it up and listen at 2x speed, maybe more, and to get as much content in. I subscribe to a number of newsletters that allow me to kind of keep a more broad view of the technology ecosystem. So it might not be particular industries or technologies that I'm currently working with day in and day out, but I am able to keep an eye on things so that if I need to, if I take on a new project and need to dive into a specific set of technologies, then, I at least have a rough understanding of what that ecosystem currently looks like. I'm also a big fan of, a select group of YouTube channels. So, one of the hacks that I have is I'll watch recorded, conference sessions, that might be posted out on YouTube or something. And I'll again kind of watch those at, an increased speed while I'm washing dishes or something along those lines. I found that a great way to kind of double use that time to keep my learning going.
Very good. How do you um, is it possible, and how do you differentiate between very useful new technologies and fads, right? Just things that will be in fashion and out of fashion very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a skill that's typically learned with time and experience. Honestly, we will see a lot of repeated patterns and technologies evolve. I think, leading edge and bleeding edge technologies are really interesting and really neat. I'll certainly play around with them and follow their docs and their tutorials just to kind of get a taste of what's going on there. But for me, when I'm making those architectural decisions, I lean very heavily on what I call boring technologies. They're the battle tested, tried and true, industry leading technologies. They're not going to be sexy. They're not going to be the most exciting. But I know that I can find engineers to work on those technologies. I know that there's sufficient documentation and support across the industry in some of those technologies. And so if it's not something that doesn't exist out there already, that I need to really adopt something that's leading or bleeding edge, then I tend to prefer not to, for a project that's going to be, bigger and longer lived. But yeah, it's important to kind of see where the industry is going, and some of those frameworks and languages are pretty cool to play around with for sure.
Very nice. I like what you said, and that probably, when you're working and consulting for companies, that might be or can be a difficult conversation, right? Because engineers love working with new stuff, sexy technologies, building new things. And sometimes you gotta be kind of the bad, I don't want to say bad cop, but yeah, the bad cop that say, no, let's, either use this platform that is already existing, or use this technology that is not as sexy, but it's going to work, and we will be able to find people. So does your role ever get political in terms of making those tough decisions?
It does. I don't like to necessarily always think of it as a political kind of, someone has to win. But I do think that there is a balance that we can strike. Again, the needs of the business and how can we best support the organization growing and building software to support our customers is, I think, paramount. It's one of the most important things. Now, I'm an engineer at heart. I love playing around with new technologies, and I don't want to be playing, building and using yesterday's technologies either. So I understand that desire. And I think my role is an opportunity to identify some kind of smaller areas where we can bring in some new technologies or new approaches, new patterns, so that we can kind of keep the organization and the software moving forward. We can keep engineers excited about what they're working on, but we're also not putting the business at risk by adopting something that may or may not be adopted across the industry, and ultimately will leave the organization in a much worse place if we were to adopt something that kind of goes away.
Very good. So lots of communication with different stakeholders in the organization, and sometimes you have to build the consensus within all of them, right? How do you do that? How do you communicate effectively with all of the different stakeholders?
You're absolutely right. Communication is key, whether we're in the office or, like many of us, in a very distributed environment. Communication is paramount. And I think that what it's taken me a little while to really understand is that everyone hears and receives information in different ways. So we can't just put out a PowerPoint and expect everyone to have read it and understand it and take away the same meaning from that information. I think it's important to share the same information across multiple different mediums, whether it's written or verbal, recorded video or recorded meeting. And we have to do it multiple times. We can't just do it once and expect everyone to have received that information. It may have fallen through their inbox and just never be seen. And I think it's important to make sure that you're getting the right information to the right person at the right time. So what's the level of information that's important for us to understand right now may be very different than the level of information that we need later on in the project or by a different group within the organization. So kind of know who your audience is. I found to be very important when communicating information. And we have to do it multiple times, and we have to provide probably a lot more detail than we would expect, right? Because we've been much closer to the information and the problem than others have. And so we need to level set and bring everyone up to speed before we can then kind of roll out any type of changes or new ideas.
Is there a little bit of education going on sometimes with some of your stakeholders before making a decision?
There absolutely is. There is absolutely an opportunity for education, and not only for myself to educate stakeholders, but also for stakeholders to help and educate me in better understanding the challenges that they have and the problems that they're trying to solve for. So I think it's very much a collaborative effort in that way.
Very nice. Brian, do you have a type of customer that you prefer? You provide fractional services to many customers. Do you look for a particular type of customer? Do you know that some customers work better or some maybe are not ready for the type of services that you provide?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think my ideal customer, they have a technical team. They have a group in their organization. They may have a CTO and a handful of engineers that have been building out a project or a product, and they are looking for help and guidance in that effort. I really enjoy coming into those organizations because that gives me an opportunity to not only jump in and solve some interesting technical challenges around the software architecture, but also taking a look at the processes and how is it that we're developing software and collaborating on that effort. It also gives me a great opportunity to help mentor engineers and leaders and stakeholders in the organization as well, and provide kind of that strong background, that mix between the technical and the business side, so that we're all effectively kind of rowing in the same direction. And so I enjoy where there's already a team and we're already working on a product. Those tend to be the most fun projects for me.
Very nice. If someone is listening to us right now and they will be interested in talking to you, is there a particular contact they can use for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably most active right now on LinkedIn. So if they want to find me, Brian Childress on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect and have a conversation. If there's anything that I can do to help, I'm happy to do it.
Very good. And for our audience and everyone that wants to become an architect, likes what they are hearing, what will be your advice for any young engineer or anyone even, before picking up engineering? What will be your advice for someone that wants to become an architect?
I think the typical advice that I give is it's incredibly important to understand the fundamentals, and not even necessarily data structures and algorithms to start, but really understand the core underlying technologies. So if we're going to be building web applications, for example, the foundations there would be HTML, CSS, and then JavaScript. Really understand those core technologies before you overlay any frameworks on top of that. That's going to give you flexibility to be able to move around. If you understand the core, the underlying, languages within that, you can better adapt to the changes in the frameworks and how the industry seems to be evolving every, year or less. From there, I think it's also valuable to understand how other systems work. How do things play together? What piece in the infrastructure, the organization, the software do you most understand? And then try and at least get a rough understanding of the other pieces and how they fit together. Find the areas that most interest you and then go deep into those areas. And that starts to build out your kind of your T shape of your developer profile. And then if you're looking, you've got some experience as an engineer and you're looking at the architect as a potential path, look at how other systems are built and how are other systems designed. What could you improve in that design? What, is most important for the business at that stage? I think that's something that we might have a tendency to over-engineer on. So try and just identify, how could I build something that is effective for us right now, but allows us to evolve and grow in the future? And, there's a lot of great examples and resources out there that can help in those, in understanding those pieces.
Very nice. Brian, it's been a pleasure. I'm already thinking about a new potential podcast with you. So hopefully there will be an opportunity. I could talk ages. And I appreciate it. I learned a lot today. I know that the audience is learning a lot as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.